Epic Games has offered Stranded Deep for free on several occasions, so I had it in my library already. Since it's a survival game, I was waiting for an official release before attempting to play. These games tend to be quite buggy, so trying them in early access is just asking to be annoyed. In the case of Stranded Deep, I had even read that there were plenty of problems when playing multiplayer, which scared me off additionally. If I've learned anything, it's that survival games are much more fun when played with others, and I wasn't gonna try this one unless it had multiplayer. Now that it's been released officially, I was ready to give it a shot. As is tradition, my wife was joining me on this adventure. Let me first get the question about the Ultrawide out of the way. Yes, the game supports both 21:9 and 32:9 natively, no need for external fixes. One of the first things I did in Stranded Deep was turn off the music. It's too repetitive and quickly became boring. Starting a game didn't take long, the multiplayer worked well enough. We get to watch an intro in which we are traveling on an airplane as it experiences a malfunction and crashes into the ocean. Luckily, we are given a lifeboat with which we can move to one of the many tiny islands surrounding us. So far so good. The game feels clunky, but it's still too early for a verdict at this point. As we reach the first island, our survival instincts kick in and we start picking up rocks and twigs, while trying to figure out how to purify water and hunt food at the same time. With such games, I always make a serious attempt to find my way without guides, which has never failed to kill me before, and of course, I almost immediately get poisoned and soon after die from a combination of thirst, hunger, and the aforementioned poison. My wife researches online and finds out that I can be brought back to life with the use of a bandage, so she manages to get me back on my feet and the shenanigans continue. Since I'm pretty hungry and thirsty, I decide that coconuts are the way to go, so I grab a bunch and start both drinking and eating from them. 3 coconuts later, my character craps his pants, which results in even more dehydration. At this point, all I can do is laugh at my own misfortune, but each failure only brings me one step closer to success. About 10 minutes later, I am dead yet again, but our second bandage gets me back on my feet. I'm now slowly beginning to think that my wife is better at this than I am, but then again, us men are known to have shorter life expectancy, so this might just be nature running its course. We start crafting things, managing our health, and even figure out how many coconuts you can consume before filling your pants. So far so good, but soon we come to the realization that our island is too tiny and offers very few materials. We can't live off of it alone. So an adventure to one of the many other islands is inevitable. We hop onto the lifeboat and travel towards the next island while being constantly harassed by a shark, which tries its best to flip our lifeboat and eat us. On this next island, we find more of the same, but there are a few sunken ships with crates, which offer additional items. This is where the game's flaws start to slowly show themselves. Firstly, let's talk about the inventory system. The game offers you a few slots on your person, and the weirdest part is that your hands count as a slot as well. This is a bit difficult to explain, so bear with me, but in essence, if you're holding something and every other slot is full, you cannot switch to anything. Here's an example. All my slots are full, I'm holding a knife. If I want to pull out a coconut from my other slot, I cannot do it unless I drop the knife on the floor. You've probably been thinking to yourself, why can't you just swap the knife and the coconut so that the knife is now in the slot of the coconut and the coconut is in your hands? The game has an answer to that question, and it is because fuck you, that's why. Funnily enough, it doesn't matter what weight you are carrying, all the items essentially are considered as the same, they take one slot. This is even more extreme when it comes to crates. You can simply put several items in a crate and then take the whole crate on your back. And when I say on your back, I just mean put it in one of the slots. This sounds like a convenient solution, but the problem is that you now have to drop the crate in order to open it, take out what you need, put it in your slots, and then be able to use it. So it sucks a lot. As far as I know, there's no effective way of expanding your slots either. No backpacks or anything like that. Not to mention that the AI of the animals, which live on the different small islands, is crap as well. Some islands have boars and giant crabs. If a crab spots you, it will beeline towards you, and killing it without taking damage is next to impossible. If the crab happens to be facing the other direction, you can rush it and stab it in the back until it dies. My initial thoughts were, well, in that case, if a crab does spot me, I can simply strafe until I'm behind it and then stab it in the back and that's it. But guess what? Once the crab spots you, it locks onto you and there is no going behind it. You have to tank the damage, which really sucks. sucks because that lock-on from the crab is merciless. It will never turn its back towards you. With the boars, the situation is very different. These things are fast and will always notice you, at which point you either attack them or you run around until they get stuck in some of the game's environment, at which point you can just stab until the boar dies. The game also offers aquatic life, but that's not very interesting. There are several types of sharks and they are all annoying, but ultimately not nearly as annoying as the shark from the game Raft. If you've watched my review of that game, you'll know which one I mean. Here, when you kill the damn thing, it's gone for a very long time, and the shark is just another environmental hazard. It's not the main enemy of the game, although it is a very annoying one. You will have to dive underwater in order to collect clay and explore the ruins of ships for various useful items. The negative thing about this is that once you have played for about 3 hours, you've pretty much seen absolutely everything you can collect and kill within this game, with the exception of the endgame bosses, which we will discuss later on. This is when the game switches from interesting to mostly boring. The islands are all very small, so the player has no choice but to travel between them constantly. Even if you ditch the emergency boat and build a raft, transporting things is still a pain. Your raft can't simply handle too many heavy things on it, such as tires for example. Another thing I have to mention is that many of the items you find are essentially useless. But in order for you to understand what I mean, I have to first talk about the crafting system. In this game, most things you craft are pointless. Here's what I mean. You level up your crafting ability by crafting stuff. As you reach higher levels, you then unlock more complex blueprints, which you can then craft, of course. However, most of those are no better than the lesser ones. Here's an example. You can build a house. It serves of protection from the sun, that's it. Since your character can get sunburned if he stays out under the sun. But guess what? There are, of course, much easier, more effective methods of protecting yourself from the sun, one of which is simply using the shadow of a tree rather than the shadow of your own home, or eating some aloe. But the point that I wanted to make here before I got distracted was that it absolutely doesn't matter what materials you're going to use to build said house. Let's take rafts next. You can build a raft from sticks or one from tires and clay tiles. Speaking of which, why would you even want to use clay for a raft? But that's a different story. The twig raft is a level 1 construct. You can make it literally at the beginning without any skill. It's very simple to make. And then there's the much higher levels of rafts which you can make with tires and other materials such as clay, as I've mentioned. And guess what? The difference is just cosmetic. You gain no advantage from using tires when compared to twigs. It's just the same thing, it just looks different, that's it. So let's get back to the topic of useless items. Imagine you want to get some fish. You can either make a fishing spear and just swim around while essentially harpooning fish with your spear, or you can find a sunken boat with bubbles on it, cut the rope holding them by striking it repeatedly with your knife, catch the bubbles as they start drifting into the open sea, then use them as one of the different ingredients necessary to make a fishing rod. And once you finally have that, you can catch a fish. You're right, a fish, which in turn will break your bobber and you get to repeat the whole thing in order to catch another one. I think you can see how one of these methods is vastly superior when it comes to getting results quickly and efficiently. In fact, the fishing spear can, be used multiple times without any problems. It's super simple to craft and it's kind of fun, to be honest. So in short, the crafting mostly sucks. You can make a small helicopter later on, which I was super excited for. But the damn thing eats so much fuel that the only way for you to be considering it as a viable option to travel between islands would be if you cheated somehow or collected tons of fuel before you took off for the first time. Now let's talk about the game's bosses. In essence, you need to kill a few of them in order to be able to start the chapter of the game that essentially ends it. I can't tell you much about it since I don't do spoilers, but my biggest issue with them is that there is no story in Stranded Deep, nothing to guide you. The player is expected to essentially stumble upon them at random, and when I say them I mean the bosses, or follow a guide. This is just bad game design since some of them will only appear after you've positioned yourself in a very particular way, which I would have never known to do on my own. And this, in my opinion, is Stranded Deep's biggest problem. It has very little content. The player is essentially asked to grind the same things mindlessly until the game just ends. No story to guide you or keep you interested, no original map locations due to procedural generation, no incentive to build a proper base since most of it is purely aesthetic. If this game didn't have multiplayer, I would have never played it more than 2 to 3 hours. But that's also its downside. or rather, there are many downsides, but this is the biggest one, that it will fool you into thinking that it's a good game. You'll probably buy it on Steam and then play it for a few hours if you haven't gotten it for free like I did, and then by the time you realize that this game kind of sucks, you can't return it anymore because it's a survival game. It takes a lot of time for you to figure out if it's good or not. All of these games kind of feel crappy at first when you start them. I'm thinking of Hobo Tough Life, which at first felt like a terrible game, but then turned out to be quite good and enjoyable. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, Stranded Deep was sadly a disappointment. I got it for free when it was given away on Epic, so I have no regrets, but if I had paid money for it, I would have been very pissed right about now. Consider the fact that I am the core audience when it comes to this game. For me, survival games are a lot of fun. I love them, I can't get enough of these games, and I have learned to deal with this genre's traditional shortcomings. Things like no proper tutorials, no proper explanation on what to do, having to use guides, having to read online for many things. I've kind of accepted this. I mean, it would be better if it wasn't this way, but I understand that most of these games are designed by independent studios and they just don't have the resources to make everything as it should be, so I just accept it. It's still a very enjoyable experience in most cases, but not now. In this case, at the beginning I was excited, by the middle I was bored, by the end I hated this game. So should you play it? If you can get it for free, I guess you could give it a try, you got nothing to lose. But I mean, the game does have some fans, so there is a chance that it might work for you on some level. Honestly, I would not pay for it, there simply isn't enough here to justify that. With that having been said, I want to thank you for watching Game Filter. I hope this review has been informative, and if yes, consider subscribing or supporting me on Patreon, the link to which you will find in the description of this video. This is Nino signing out.